spend time doing. And this is Solace and Serenity. If you are here, we're glad you're here. If you're catching this as a replay on YouTube, we are glad that you went so far as to click the link and join us in a different time and space, but with the same intention. And whenever we come together, we always visit our mission, our vision, and our core values. Our mission is to equip change makers with the tools to look within and actively respond to daily life from a centered place. Our core values are connection, inclusiveness, and love. And so these are filters that help us discern what we will share with each other here as I'll say, use the term local community, but also expanding beyond what we know as this community and serving a global community to use contemplative spirituality to heal, renew, and inspire. I do want to be um, a little more mindful of the time. So I'm just going to give myself this must be Walter coming in. I do want to give myself a reminder of kind of where we are in time and space. The broad title of the series that we're in at this time is People of Practice. And it's coming from, as I mentioned, community questions, things that you have shared as what I would call like your spiritual interests, about the spiritual journey, and things of that nature, but also acknowledging and bringing into um, in a new way the fact that we are a community that is exploring contemplative practices. And there have been pockets of time where we've had, a variety of offerings, Wednesday meditations, in-person gatherings. And as our community has been shifting and changing, there's kind of been a change to the rhythm of those ancillary offerings. And so I want to kind of bring them in and explore them more on Sunday, where we previously have been looking at the false self, the true self, and things of that nature. Of course, those are still things we'll explore. But how do practices then begin to become vehicles or modalities in which we become aware of what motivates us to take action, aware of these unconscious desires? And so that's the broad kind of theme of people of practice. And specifically, what I'd like us to sit with today is this question of how do I trust my intuition if I'm unsure of my purpose? And I'll share a little bit more about. I have shared that this comes from your questions, but I also want to share a little bit more about what I sense as an invitation collectively during this time. So, the practice that we've been looking at is the breath prayer. Last week, I actually guided um, a breath prayer. We'll call it a meditation. And so we'll get that edited and shared on our YouTube channel this week. And so it can be a resource if you prefer a guided practice. But it can also serve as a template if it's something that you would like to guide yourself through. You can listen to it and then engage with it that way. It's not necessarily a practice that requires guidance from another person. It's really about the guidance and attuning to the guidance within. So this brings me to the intention for today is to take a look at the breath prayer as a source for guidance. I want to offer space for what I'm calling intuitive listening. And then I want to also offer reflection questions, not so much for you to respond to at this time, but questions that you can make note of and carry forward if you're in a period of outer transition as it relates to your inner person purpose. So I will say a bit more about that as we go forward. And if you have a journal handy and like to use your fancy fountain pens to make note of some of these questions, you're welcome to. Or if you just want to take a screenshot when we get to the questions, they're designed for you to take forward. Um, and as I've shared, that this series is coming from this question that we asked to the community. What are your spiritual interests, your questions and needs? What practices are you curious about? So the flow for today is we're going to start with that big question within the title. How do I trust my intuition if I'm unsure of my purpose? And then we'll move into outer transitions and inner purpose. So I am specifically speaking to those of you who are maybe um, what we'll call in between spaces. And then I'll offer a practice now and the questions that you can respond to later. So, how do I trust my intuition if I'm unsure of my purpose? The question that I would offer back is actually presented here as a sentence that should end with a question mark. It is, what if part of our purpose is to become reacquainted with our intuition or the spiritual awareness that resides beneath our ordinary awareness? For this, I'm going to lean into Acts 17:28, which says, "For in him we live and move and have our being." And also remind us of something that we've looked at earlier in this series about scripture and what fire or flame or smoke represented in the Old Testament, which was the presence of the divine. So we looked at these verses when we started this series, and we explored the covenant that the divine made with Abraham, and how this ritual of coming into a covenant or cutting a deal involved actually taking livestock, having them, halving them, cutting them in half. And then there's this story where the divine, represented by flame and smoke, passes through as part of this covenant. And so I am drawing us back to that story as a way to become aware of a bit of a shift that takes place in scripture. So, keeping in mind what we're talking about here in this moment is attuning to what is referred to in Acts, that in Him we live and move and have our being. And there's this shift that happens in Kings that says, "But God wasn't in the fire, and after the fire, a gentle and quiet whisper." This is the verse that, for those of you who know Miss Reese, when she offered her divine whispers, she would draw a devotion. She would draw from this verse. But for the people of the ancient world, this would have been a new way of being acquainted with the divine. They were used to God being represented by smoke and flame. And here in Kings, God is not where God is used to. God is not where people are used to um, finding God, right? So here there's a shift taking place. God is not in the fire, but in the gentle and quiet whisper. So the question becomes, how do we hear the gentle and quiet whisper of God, especially when we're holding these questions around purpose, right? And wanting to be um, aware of uh, how we are here to serve. And we've talked a lot about how purpose is deeply connected to presence and being. So I'd invite you to go back and um, kind of revisit those if needed. So less about the activity that we do or the action that we take, so to speak, and more about what is the invitation here in this moment, in the eternal now. And so, as people, these big questions come up around our life and purpose, and how do we hear the gentle and quiet whisper of God? So, in this series where we're exploring being people of practice, the way that I would share the breath prayer in the context of this is that the breath prayer as a practice is about relationship. So there's this moment where we listen for how we would get God's attention. Another way to understand that is how we would call the name of God today, and also how we would hear God call our names. So it's this relationship that is being nurtured through this practice. And then through that nurturing, there's also um, this nurturing of our intuition that begins to take place. So when we look at it this way, the connection to our breath, which Lisa helped us kind of settle into this morning, we're reminded that the name of God was believed to not be spoken so much as it was breathed. So the breath prayer is this practice that helps us uh, return to our own breath. And in returning to our own breath, return to the name of God. And in returning to the name of God, hearing who we are created to be outside of the conditions and programs that have existed since the beginning of time. And I was reminded of this quote from Hildegard of Bingen as we um, are moving into this idea of intuition and purpose. So, is there a volunteer that would unmute and just share the quote?
I can read it. Oh.
Thanks, David.
Then it pleased the king to raise a small feather from the ground, and he commanded it to fly. The feather flew, not because of anything in itself, but because the air bore it along. Thus am I, a feather on the breath of God.
Thank you, David. So here we have this mystic who's giving this beautiful um, metaphor that she is but the feather on the breath of God. And so, what is she speaking to here when it comes to breath and movement and relationship with the divine? And how are we invited to? Also remember that we are in relationship with this breath, that this breath can serve as what moves us to action. And sometimes being attuned to that will prompt us to make changes, either of our own fruition or sometimes, you know, life happens and things shift. And so I want to speak to um, trusting this breath during times of outer transition and staying attuned to or true to the inner purpose. So, this is also known, these in between spaces are known as liminal space. And it's something that we've explored in the past as a community that the world, excuse me, and also our unconscious desires, we we like certainty. We want to have feet planted in one space and know that that ground is going to be safe and secure. But as life progresses, we are often invited to kind of linger in the in between. So, this scenarios where we're leaving a situation, entering a new situation, but you haven't quite left and you haven't quite entered. And what the spiritual journey invites us to do is to recognize that we deeply crave certainty, but to also linger in the mystery of this space, of the in between. And what I sense at this time, both through my own experience, I talked a few months ago about um, how I was feeling like a toddler, is the example that I used. That I there was a moment where I was truth communicating, and I was like, I feel real clunky. Like I don't quite I can't remember how to walk. Um, and I'm also sensing this in conversations that I'm having with many of you, and also seeing it on a broader scale, so to speak. And it's this movement to more expansive leadership. Now, I kind of went back and forth with this word leadership because that can feel like many things. It can feel very authoritative, and um, I'm not coming from that perspective. I'll say a little bit more about that as we go forward. What I'm talking about is um, instead of thinking of it as like a, a level in leadership, like on a ladder, I would offer this perspective of like an ascension, which I realize still gives this implication of movement upward. But if we think about the spiritual journey, if we think about the wisdom of Jesus, there is and the path of his life. Um, there is this path of movement which leads to um, a death or a crucifixion, right? And the death is not the end. There's also a resurrection and an ascension. And so too are we invited to recognize this divine wisdom within the living of our lives. So I use this term expansive leadership because I believe this is a space collectively that we are being invited to move into. That this is a time where the movement is away from supremacy and toward sovereignty. That we are living in this time that is shaking us and saying, I'm thinking of there are so many experiences, even as of yesterday, as the life of Nolan Wells um, as his services took place. There are so many levels of supremacy that um, are pointing us to embrace and rise in our sovereignty. And so this is, I'm trying to do my best to kind of give explanation for what I mean here. So I'm not talking about leadership that comes from a place of supremacy. I'm talking about this inner well that draws up and emboldens us to live firmly in our sovereignty. And I believe that this is, these in between spaces that we are occupying or moving towards or sensing um, is a movement of spirit, that there is a collective paradigm shift taking place, and the gold of the strongly sensitive is needed. Lisa gave this beautiful illustration of not only um, the 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 joy that was present when you were brought into the world, but also the light. She moved us into this place of being in the light of that and being in the light of that together. And so when I use the word strongly sensitive, who am I referring to? Well, I'm referring to um, those of you who are aware of this intuition, this connection that you have with the divine, and also are very aware of how it may not have always felt safe to be the person in the family, in the circle, in the classroom, in the office space, who has this sensitivity, um, and to uh, more deeply embrace this sensitivity as something that is a gift and deeply needed at this time. Not to shrink away from this sensitivity, but to more fully um, embrace it and live into it. So as I've looked at these questions that I've sat with myself, right? Like I'm sharing as much from my own wrestling as I'm sharing with from a place of the things that have been shared from our community. This question comes up for me. Are my questions about purpose and intuition arising from a curiosity or perhaps even a fear or excitement about what will happen if I rise? So all of these things can go coexist at the same time. If I move into embracing my sovereignty from a place of confidence, what does that imply for the places that I'm in? What does that mean for the relationships that I'm in? What will happen if I rise? And because we've looked at the false self a multitude of times, we know that those unconscious desires for security and survival, esteem and affection, power and control. These are deeply embedded in us and they've kept us alive. And so, what contemplative practices help us do is to untangle our identity from those desires, to say they exist and also they are not who we are. So, these deep questions connected to purpose and intuition often come from a place of, is it safe to be seen? If I move into this strong sensitivity that I have, will I survive if I take this risk? What will fall away as I rise up? So you can see how these questions connect to the emotional programs for happiness. They connect to the false self in action, and they also speak to the very true reality that for uh, those of us on the margins of traditional society, it is not always safe to be seen, right? We see the repercussions of um, loss of life if a risk is taken. Um, what will fall away as I rise up? Like what will this do to my sense of belonging? And so as I was preparing this, I was hearing the words of Dr. Barbara Holmes, who often brought in um, the words from Jesus as she taught us in living school, and she said, "In this world, you will have trouble." Right? That contemplative practice is not a safety net. It's about this inner sense of safety, this inner sense of security, this inner sense of belonging that is beyond what the world can give and offer. Hence, take heart, right? That I have overcome the world. So this is the wisdom, this is the lineage that we are invited to embody as we follow the wisdom of Jesus. And what I sense is happening at this time is that in the spiritual journey, the way that it's taught and explained is that there is a scaffolding that takes place as we are being, I'll use the construction term, as we are being built up, right? And at some point, the scaffolding goes away and the building stands strong. So, in this sense of moving into expansive leadership, there's also this trusting that it's okay if the scaffolding falls away. And this brings me to a story and also the reason why I recommended having your journal. And it's to go as you feel guided. So, holding that imagery or that metaphor of um, scaffolding serving its purpose, how do I know, how my intuition is speaking to me when I'm unclear of my purpose? I want to share a little story with you, which involves Malcolm Gladwell, who I know is an author that's been mentioned several times in um, our community as uh, uh, we've read, a number of you have read his books. But as I was thinking about this expansive leadership space that I sense I am in, we are being invited to. And as I started to think about this idea of like the scaffolding falling away, I was reminded of a conversation that I had with somebody. Um, this was a while ago, and I don't even know how it came up, but what I want to invite you to do is to think back to 10 years ago, which is 2016-ish, and think about what was happening in your life and what was going on, if you can recall for a moment. And the reason why I'm inviting you to think about this is because in that conversation that I can't remember how it came up, the idea of the 10,000 hour rule came up in this conversation. And in the conversation, the person had shared with me, "Oh, you're approaching your 10,000 hours." I had not read this book, so I did not know what they were talking about when they said this to me. And so I asked them to explain. And essentially, the idea, which I know many of you are familiar with, but if you're not, is that through practice and experience of anything, something, not negating talent, Malcolm Gladwell says, you become um, an expert, so to speak, or um, the word that is used is mastery, like you master something. And it takes about 10 years to accumulate your 10,000 hours. Now, I was thinking about this in the context of purpose and um, intuition and thinking, I wonder what collectively uh, we have, and I kind of shy away from, I'm using mastery as a hyperbole. It's not my favorite word. But the question being, what have we come into an area of expertise, experience, wisdom? Deep wisdom is probably a better way because I don't know if we can ever really master anything. I believe we're always learning and always growing. But what lives in this community? How does that connect um, to purpose? And what if some of the scaffolding of that decade, some of the scaffolding of that 10 years is asking to be let go, so to speak? Another way to think of this is like it's been a prop, it's been a crutch, it's held us up. The way that this manifests in our prayer life is we start to say things like, it feels like my prayers aren't working. And it's not that your prayers aren't working, it's that you're being invited into deeper levels of relating and knowing the intimacy of the divine. So it's often in the prayer life, it's a time where um, vocal prayer begins to fall away and silence starts to come in. But in the perspective of purpose, in thinking about this, I would pose this question about the scaffolding falling away. Now, the interesting thing about this is I recently went and was like, because I haven't read this book and because the 10,000 hours was only offered to me through conversation, I was like, what does Malcolm Gladwell actually say about this? And I found something very interesting. He started to talk about how when you write something, it's not yours anymore, it's your readers. And you cannot control what your readers do with what you have written. And I discovered that when he was talking about the 10,000 hours, the point that he was trying to make is that nobody comes into mastery on their own. You need community around you. But what the general public gravitated toward was, I'm going to be an expert. This is what my, this is where my 10,000 hours um, it has landed. And then I mentioned talent because he goes on to share that at some point in the story, people started saying that, regardless of talent, if you have 10,000 hours, and he's like, I never said that. So, putting it into this context, this is where I want to uh, offer questions to take with you and then offer practice in support of the broader question here about how do I trust my intuition when I'm unsure of my purpose? So, first question, If you were to receive a 10,000 hour certificate in something based on your practice, your experience over the past 10 years, what would it be in? Again, these are questions to hold and take with you. Maybe you have a response now. So thinking about the past decade of your life, for me, 10 years ago, I was already laid off from my job, but told I could stay until a project was complete. I was sensing a call to ministry, but unsure of what that looked like. Several of my very important relationships were dissolving. And so that's where I found myself 10 years ago. So now looking back, of course, my life has changed drastically. And I never would have imagined that this sense of a call to ministry would have brought me here. And so that's the invitation here. Because I think that that question, not from the level of becoming a master of something, but like, what has your experience been like over the past 10 years? And is there a thread, right, that you can connect to maybe what you were wrestling with then that is a through line for your purpose? So that's the first question. That's a question. And then the next question is, what has recently helped you to understand your power, potency, and your creative desire? How might this be inviting you to new areas of leading and also maybe to let go of some of the old ones? So, what has recently helped you to understand your power, potency, and your creative desire? And how might this be inviting you to more expansive areas of leading or being in the world? And also maybe let go of some of the old ones. So, like a piece of the scaffolding needs to come down. And then the third question I offer is, where or how are you being guided to offer and or ask for help? Because going back to the first question and what Gladwell shared was that he brought up the 10,000 hours to say we don't arrive there alone. So, where or how are you being guided to offer and ask for help? So, those are questions to take with you. The practice now is connected to intuition. So, the intuitive practice is to take a deep breath and to become aware of which of those questions do you sense you are guided to respond to first. So I didn't put them in numerical order for a reason. Uh, Intuition does not follow uh, the path of a numbered list. It follows the path of of guidance. It's like a magnet. So where do you feel drawn to? Where do you feel guided? What question has resonance? And then the beautiful thing about it is also to be aware of any sense that these questions may not be for you. Like they don't speak to you. There is no magnetism. You're not drawn to it. And recognizing that that too is an intuitive sense, an intuitive knowing, like this doesn't apply to me, and it's okay, right? So I'll go back to the questions now that we've looked at them, and then just give a little bit of space. And then I would invite you to, if you want to, not to respond to the question, but to respond to which question do you sense you are guided to respond to first? So. taking a deep breath, I will read the questions, and then you're invited to just share which one do you feel invited to spend time with first. Also, maybe not at all. So, if you were to receive a 10,000 hour certificate in something based on your practice or experience over the past 10 years, what would it be in? What has recently helped you to understand your power, potency, and your creative desire? How might this be inviting you to new areas of leading and also maybe let go of some of the old ones? Where or how are you being guided to offer and or ask for help? And then when you're ready, you can share with us which of these questions you may feel most drawn to respond to. So you can unmute or share it in the chat.
Hey, Pastor Tia.
Hey, Martin.
I think it's the second one. I think it's um, just thinking about this question of um what has helped me to kind of grow and understand my power and my creative desire. And then even the second part of that is um what are some things that I need to let go of and unlearn so that I can continue to expand and not be bound to like just previous knowledge. So I think that one is the one that resonates with me
Thank,
most.
thank you, Martin. And I have in the, I can see in the chat, there's some sames. So Susie, Andre, and Roz both feel uh, gravitation towards the middle question. Andre shared, stepping out of my full-time position is the thing I had to let go of to follow this path. Thank you.
I'm also gonna say verbally same. That same part of number two.
Thank you, Lisa. So if you'd like, you can journal or screenshot these questions and maybe spend some time with them this week or at any point in the future. I don't know, maybe next year, who knows? So the questions are designed to help us nurture that sense of purpose, but the order in which you respond to them is designed to help nurture trusting your intuition. That sometimes number two is number one when it comes to how we are being guided and moving into deep trust of that. That sometimes there is nothing there for us to explore at all and to trust this. So Ed says the third question resonates with me, still reflecting on the answer. Alicia says the first question. David, were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, okay. I saw you were unmuted, so just checking.
Oh, I mean, all of these questions, I think, kind of pull at me for sure. Um, I think if you answer them, the next thing for me is like, okay, then what do you do about the answer to these questions?
Yeah, that's very true, right? And what my hope is, so you could actually, okay, couple of things. One, this is uh, uh, the order in which we respond to these questions is just my simple offering of saying, like, trust how you are being guided. Go as you feel guided. Now, that same going as you feel guided, the same sense that you have that says, I'm going to begin with number two, or I'm going to begin with number three. Because we are in relationship with that guidance, it is also the place from which we can respond to these questions. So we can turn back to taking a deep breath, picking up our journal or pen, or just, whatever feels most appropriate for you and where you are. And this just kind of free writing, right? Like not censoring ourselves, just letting whatever response would come up. And then David offers this wonderful question: what do I do after I've answered this? Well, the breath prayer teaches us that we're in relationship and we're in conversation. So we respond to these questions and then we come back with our own question. What do I do now that I've answered this? And then in the stillness, see if anything arises. Maybe it's set it down. Maybe it's, um, celebrate a decade of a beautiful journey or a crazy experience. What the breath prayer is helping to do is to remind us that we are in relationship and conversation with whatever it is drawing us to the order of response. So the question when we say, what do I do after I answer this? What do we do after we answer this? Like take it back to that internal knowing. So this is where we begin to lean into our curiosity. Lisa says, as I think of 2016, I took a job that was not aligned and worked it for 6 years. I am continuing to reap the fruit and gain the wisdom from those years of learning what not to do. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. Everybody if you wanted the questions, I'll leave them up there so you can grab them one more time. And then if you want to come back and share next week, maybe any of your revelations of any of this. Ammo says 5 years of any job work week is 10,000 hours. Do I just go to work and quit on Monday? No, that is not what I'm saying. I am not saying go quit your job that you have mastered, that you have mastered life. Please. What I'm saying is attune to spirit. Oh my gosh. Okay. Um, any thing that you all would like me to go back to or questions about anything that I shared here?
Can you go to the slide that had the expansive leadership uh, statement quote,
Yes.
please?
This one.
Yes, that one. And it's that one. Thank you. What came
Mhm.
to mind when you started to introduce that one was how beautiful your journey has been an illustration of that.
Thank you.
Because when David was opening us with and shared the announcement again about what's the long name of the the event, healing
Yeah.
healing the breach.
Hmm.
Um, just a moment of highlighting and celebrating with the humility that you have shared it. But I think it is noteworthy to acknowledge that it is a beautiful thing that you are sharing space, time, platform, forum, etc., with such souls as these.
No, thank you, Roz.
Just the little bit, and I do that, I say that in quotes because it has been powerfully poignant and profound when I have noticed Bishop Buddy speaking truth with like uh no shame, fear, or anything else to
Mhm.
and about power. And the fact, literal fact, that visually your photo is next to hers on the slide promoting this event. And your name is amongst these names and Tim Shriver. And I'm saying that to say, given what, I mean, I thought of it as David was talking about it. I was a little delayed. I'm glad that Carlos did the little celebration emoji, but I was trying to fumble to do it too, because I was thinking that as that slide was being shown by David, that I know that you know the honor that it is, but relative to what you're sharing in this truth communication and how you even presented that slide as an expansive leadership and just in your journey, and you just kind of reviewed it for us a few minutes ago, and then just to know and not know that that decision at that time then would like evolve into this slide being a part of our open,
Mhm.
of our gathering today, and
Thank
what's to
you.
come in that and through that and beyond it is beautiful. And I just want to highlight it in the context of what you're sharing.
Thank you, Roz. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I also am very grateful, uh, you know, talk about, yeah, it has been a decade of community support that has allowed this uh, opportunity and I to meet. So I appreciate what you're saying and also recognize there was a lot of support that I'm not traveling alone.
Mhm.
And if I am being very honest, when I received the invitation, I thought it I thought it was to be on a panel and I was like, yes, I could sit in a pan on a panel and that would be an honor to sit beside these people and have like a panel discussion. And then I learned this week that it's more so think about like letting go of the scaffolding of a panel and what was you. So I am sharing this. I am sharing this with you all from a place of also just trying to remind myself. So yeah.
Well, you have a sister in Bishop Buddy. Will be your
Thank
buddy.
you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, there's a little bit of like the big gulp and my heart dropped into my stomach. I was like, what? I thought I was going to be on a panel and there was going to be other voices. But, you know, deep breath.
Those are little butterflies that know you can do it. So
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. And welcome to Lana. All right. I don't know if I can. Here we go. I said I wanted to be mindful of the time. So, uh, if you do have any questions or things that you would like me to return to, or if you want to share, what comes up for you as you sit with these questions in the future, you can, of course, drop them in group me or I'm happy to chat about it. Um, I see, well, I'm going to catch up on the chat a little bit. So, Walter, it's good to see you. Um, we will transition to our offering moment, and um, I feel like there was something else. Oh, well, prayer, of course. So we'll stop our recording, and if there are prayer requests or things that you would like to uh, have support or celebration around, then we'll create space for that too. I do want to share an update. I'll go back to my slides. So last week I had just returned, well, back to town and back to awakenings, and so I had not had the opportunity to get full financial snapshots, although I did at that point had um, where we had ended up for July, and I hadn't shared anything about August. That I hadn't pulled reports or made adjustments or any of that thing. So we have that today, and I thank you all for your patience. The ways that you can give are ways that you are probably familiar with. We have Secure Give, which is an app, and uh, also we have Text to Give that is run through Secure Give. So you can text Awaken and an amount number to the number that you see there, 832-481-4434, and give a one-time gift or a sustaining gift if you'd like to. And then, of course, we have Cash App. On Cash App, we are Awakenings Movement. On Venmo, we are Awakenings Dash Inc. These platforms, along with Secure Give, can be found on our website, which is awakeningsinc.org.